trendlet meaning a small trend. The larger trend is urbanization, right? People and jobs moving to urban areas. The trendlet, though, is city people want rural places to go be, right? So this is about the trendlet. So this is Mountaindale, New York. It's in the Catskills, about 2 hours north of New York City. The Catskills was a Jewish resort community through the middle of the 20th century, but after the 60s, I don't know why exactly, but emptied out. I mean, all the town struggled. So Mountaindale, New York, maybe a couple thousand people, something like that. One guy whose family was in business in upstate New York ran grocery stores or grocery store equipment manufacturing or something like that. He bought 31 downtown buildings along Main Street in Mountaindale, New York, and has orchestrated its comeback, and so this is the story of its comeback. So this woman raises Angora rabbits and knits vintage clothing from them. There's one store. That would be a big seller, I think.
Maybe she kills the rabbits?
She kills the rabbits, right? So art gallery, I'm not going to say, I'll just flip through here. This is the guy, Butch Resnick, who bought everything. He grew up in a little town nearby. And he came across a regional magazine that this woman started called DV8, which just stands for Delaware Valley 8. So 8 little towns in Delaware Valley. And it was kind of a style, arts, design magazine that she was running. She also owned 2 other Vietnamese restaurants. So he said, you've done this great job with this magazine where not much is happening. She's got great advertising. She's making money. He's like, so you've curated a magazine. I want you to curate this town. I want you to take it over. You're in charge. Do whatever you want with it. I own the town. Whatever. So she does. First of all, she puts her Vietnamese restaurant there and does other stuff. This is a little building. Here's several art galleries. So obviously proximity to New York City helps. And New Yorkers have a big tradition of wanting places outside the city, so that's a natural flow. Here's a little house that's being renovated. We have a lot of those around here, so it's inspiring. For cheap. This is like one guy has camels on his farm, so it's a gathering of eccentrics. Okay, so here is another little town reference, Cerro Gordo, California, 250 miles north of Los Angeles. It's an old mining town. A group of investors bought the town for $1.4 million. Another group of investors bought Wardensville, West Virginia, bought the whole town and are developing it. Another group of investors bought a town in Maine. I can't remember the name of it. So I mean, this is funny. This is interesting. So people with money, who are good with money, who've made a lot of money, are developing small towns as little retreat getaways for city people. So that's interesting to me. And guess who else is doing it? So the Walmart Reimagine campaign, Walmart has rolled out that it is going to build, this is my term, not theirs, little fake towns near lots of their Walmarts. So pardon my cynicism here, but so Walmart came in, wiped out most main streets throughout America, and is now rebuilding them next to their Walmarts. Why? Because people don't like going in big Walmarts anymore. They want to walk around little city places with sidewalks with individual shops. So this is Walmart's new venture. So anyway. So this is the trendlet, right? Is the cachet or the hitness of the small rural place. Lots of stylish city people have this craving for the rural. And so in Mountaindale, New York, this guy's philosophy, he knows that not everyone's going to move there full time. He doesn't care. Most of them are just there on the weekends. But that's good enough for the town's revival because they bring lots of money and they make possible all these businesses and shops and restaurants and art galleries. So there's weekenders, there's retired people, there's artists, there's people looking for just priced out of cities that want a cheap place to live that has some interesting things for them to do. So this is the trend. The larger trend, of course. So talk about us in Fort Scott. So the larger trends aren't good, right? Urbanization isn't necessarily good for us. The clustering of people and jobs in cities, like we're going to lose that. The trendlet could be real good for us, right? Not exactly this trendlet, but the dynamics of this trendlet could be good. The fact that, as close as we are to Kansas City, that there are and will be lots of people with money who want a place like this to weekend or summer or once in a while. I mean, our lake is probably a decent example already that this is true. Some of you know this already, but the Kansas Health Foundation has their demographic report out. Have any of you read this, seen this? Yeah. So their projections out 20 years and 50 years for small communities like ours in the eastern half of Kansas are that we'll lose 10% of our population in 20 years, 30% of our population in 50 years. So that means in 2036, I mean, if they're right, and if it happens exactly like that for Fort Scott, a community of 7,200, say, in 10 years, and a community of 5,400 in 50 years, something like that, right? I don't know how you feel about that. I don't feel like that's a disaster scenario. Like, even if that happens, I know a ton of places that are 7,000 people or 5,000 people that are really interesting and flourishing and vibrant. I mean, to just have to adapt and become a different sized community. The person that I read the most on this demographic stuff on urbanization is a guy named Richard Florida. Anybody familiar with Richard Florida? He wrote books that sold a ton a few years back on the creative class. But anyway, so he, I think he's at the University of Toronto. He helps non-statistical people like me understand the trends, the economic trends that feed urbanization. Why do all college graduates move to cities? Why do all artists move to cities? Why are all jobs moving to cities? You know, so Amazon's headquarters thing, have you been following that at all? They had this big nationwide competition about who was gonna give them enough tax breaks and other perks to get in their city. So they've made a lot of people mad because they chose not one city like they said they were going to, but two, Long Island City, Queens, and New York City, and northern DC, I can't remember what Virginia town it is. But their reasoning was that they need so many tech sort of employees that they can't possibly find them all in one city, so they need two cities. So anyway, like 25,000 people hired into these places. So I mean, so there was never any conversation that those things would go anywhere but a city. Why? Because they need to be where they can find 25,000 young people who want to work in tech, right? So all those trends are hard for us to live with, right? That's a game we can't win. But the trendlet game is a game we can definitely win. And I think if you look at our lake, if you look at our downtown, these are exactly the things they're having. Interesting people developing interesting businesses, developing properties that would be interesting to people and do attract people from out of town. So this was I took this as good news as I started thinking about this in relation to the hospital. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish. I know that's negative news and it's challenging and we're working through it and we don't quite know what that will end up. And I hope we have, you know, a full set of everything, right? But good things are going on in lots of places that are more remote than we are, that are much smaller than we are, that have less going on than we have going on, and that have no health care whatsoever. So I hope we focus on the challenges of this healthcare stuff, and people are working on it, but I hope that it doesn't consume all our energy because there's an interesting future for smaller places. We just have to be creative in how we go about it. I will be honest though and tell you that all the articles on the development of these small places, there is conflict, of course, right? Because the kinds of people that are being attracted to these places when they get developed or gentrified are sort of city hipsters, and so there's a culture clash with longtime residents. And so it's not all, I didn't mean to say that it's a perfect story and they're doing wonderfully. I mean, they have to navigate, you know, between the new restaurants and the restaurants that have been there in a family for 4 generations, right? And so they're all, you know, kind of navigating that gentrification conflict. But interestingly, all the city people say when they want to get away to a rural place, they want to be around cowboys and farmers and people not like them. So they're not, generally speaking, they're not wanting to be cocooned in another, you know, hip city neighborhood. They like, what they're trying to find is a place with, you know, authenticity and farming and people doing craftsy things and people who aren't, you know, hung up on themselves in terms of culture. So we have that. So anyway, thoughts, remarks, questions, Darlene?
Actually, I just read about this in New York. There are many people that are in distress with the city. There are some farms that have cows. Have you heard about this? In which these people from New York City, downtown, Fifth Avenue and everything, are going to these farms and they're hugging cows. They find cows very comforting, and they're getting some therapy, like in their brain, you know, like hug a cow. And we've got a lot of cows here.
We do. Right, so the underlying story of this is what do urban people with money want to do?
Hug cows. These urban people with money.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Well,
It's beyond me.
you know, this is probably more viable here than New York City because most New Yorkers are 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th generation urban dwellers. And Kansas City is a place made up of small town people that went there for economic advantage, including me. And I think the trend is moving towards people are having a preference more towards quality of life than they are economic achievement. And that was what, you know, the cry of my heart was, is I want more quality of life and I'm less concerned about what I get paid for what I do in the day. And I think that's a big potential crowd in Kansas City because most of those people have small town roots. And so
Interesting point. I hadn't thought of it.
Kansas City is a big little town. And so I think people are more susceptible to the charms of Fort Scott. I sat next to some Kansas Cityans at the brew pub, and they were just like, in Fort Scott. So, but you know, I understand what you're saying about the negative population trend, and we can be happy if Fort Scott's 5,400 just as well as we can at 7,200. The problem is the structure of our taxes. We have some structures that have to be paid for.
Yeah.
We have Taj Mahal water systems and sewer treatment that we have to operate now. And so we have to be anticipatory and we have to say, okay, we're going to settle for population 5,400. Now we have to cut costs of governing this area to accommodate that.
I didn't mean, oh, it's fine, it's no big deal. You're I just meant, sometimes I'm in conversations with people and the tone of the conversation is like, either you're growing or you're dead.
Right.
I think that's not very realistic. In other words, I think some very bright people did those Kansas Health Foundation numbers, and more likely than not, over the next 20 and 50 years, small places in Kansas are going to struggle population-wise. And all I was trying to say was, I don't think constricting a little bit in size means you can't be a vibrant, interesting, flourishing place.
If you plan for it.
But if you plan for it, you're right, there will be all kinds of...
Yeah. And Baxter Springs is doing just exactly what you're talking about. A wealthy person bought half of the downtown area and they're converting it to something that attracts outsiders.
Oh, good. Good.
I'd like to interject something here. You talked about that one town, they have basically weekend where people are coming. I've mentioned this to some of the city people. One of the things that this area does extremely well, I think, is recreation and entertainment. And we started with the Roach ball field out there, and we've got several ball fields, but I've been with my grandchildren on volleyball tournaments, soccer tournaments, all those things that bring thousands and thousands of people to an area for a weekend. Fort Scott is situated in a very good place for surrounding for 100 miles to get people in here. Once you get them here to see what's going on and you get some things downtown, but you look at recreation and entertainment, people will go a long way for that, especially if their kids are involved. And we've got a great area, and I think we really need to focus more on developing those things. And
Our
they'll bring people.
Our transit guest tax has tripled in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other side of that though is the younger generations leave these small communities. And Fort Scott's a good example. How many of the younger generations, and Lisa spent years in Fort Scott High School, how many of them stay in Fort Scott, stay in the local community? We've got it's a great community for youth activities and supporting of youth, those that live here, and the elderly people. But the younger people don't stay here. They go out where the jobs are, and that's the reason you find so many Fort Scott graduates that live up in Kansas City, or St. Louis, or Wichita.
Yeah, and my point is kind of like, I find it unrealistic to try to reverse that trend. So thinking about finding how we can become accessible for people with money and they need somewhere to go burn it, I think we'd be a good place for that.
Do you have to be young and live in the city to be a hipster? But, I mean, can you think of maybe there
Yeah,
are
what's
some
the
of us
definition
here
of a
that
hipster?
I mean, it's like, how many sweater vests do you have is one, just general.
Phil's got lots.
Billy, you'll need to start stocking some more
Yes, that's
sweater
true,
vests.
that's true.
Well, can I make a comment? My husband and I grew up in a little town of about 1,700 people in North Dakota back in the, I graduated from high school in 69. No,
Wow.
67, because I got married in 69. But anyway, we moved to the Kansas City area in 1982, and then when we went to retire, we moved to San Antonio. We hated it in San Antonio, and we didn't want to move back to a city. And I will tell you, we feel like we have come home. And I think developing, the downtown, any activity that's going on to develop the downtown, because when anybody, we just took people up to the airport that came and spent the weekend from Northern California. We went into shops, they stood and visited, they loved this community. And they loved the businesses, and, they would retire here, but they live up in old mining area, so they live out of the city too. But Fort Scott does have a lot to offer, and anything more that can develop to bring people in, whether it's for a weekend or to retire and live here.
We
this
need
is
to hear
just,
more of that, those of us that are natives, somebody from the outside gives us a fresh perspective. That sounds great.
Well, I'll put my perspective in, and I pretty much raised here, left, spent 4 years in a small town just right outside of Wichita. Loved the small town life, hated being in the city of Wichita. But I went back to college in my 40s, had a lot of good offers to go to big cities or travel with companies, but I turned them down simply because I'm not a big city type of person. I want the quality of life, and to me this is home, this is family, and I want to be here and help make the town better, make it grow. So I'll have that same perspective here.
Good. Well, Jared mentioned something during his talk that we are authentic here, and I think that would be a good tagline, like Fort Scott, Authentic America. So I wrote that on. But anyways, thank you all for coming. Janet's $2 for the cup because I didn't see the cup today. So there you go, banker. So
I'd like to commend Greg for using the word anticipatory. story. That's 6 syllables. I've never known anybody that can use 6 syllable words.
Are you finished and not done, Phil? Are you finished?
I'm finished.
You're not done?
I'm done.
You're done or finished?
I'm finished.
Oh, okay.
I'm finished.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.